When I started out learning Japanese, I spent a long time learning the language with textbooks. I've memorized words, read my first basic text, and built a quite solid understanding of how the grammar works. But when I was trying to watch a Japanese movie without subtitles, I still barely understood a word of what was being said. And when landing in Tokyo for the first time, I realized that even simple interactions such as ordering a coffee were actually super hard for me to do. Sound familiar? So today I'm going to share how I went from wasting tremendous amounts of time being a Japanese textbook warrior to now chatting with locals and consuming media made for native speakers without too much effort really. No matter whether it's watching movies, reading books, or listening to podcasts or whatever. And we will talk about why people tend to fall into the textbook trap in the first place and how textbooks effectively keep us from ever really mastering the language, and what alternative strategies we can use to learn Japanese in a much faster and better way. If you're new here, hi, my name is Matt, and I self-studied Japanese for almost 9 years now. And on this channel, we're exploring evidence-based strategies to make learning Japanese more effective and enjoyable. So why do we try to learn languages with textbooks? Learning any foreign language is a daunting task, to say the least. There's unknown vocabulary and phrases and a bunch of unfamiliar rules of how to pronounce words. And in the case of Japanese, to top it all off, not just one, but 3 different writing systems, including everyone's favorite, the kanji. And it's no surprise then that in this world full of foreign concepts, we are looking for help. Something to make sense of all that chaos. Something that offers a structure to things and tells us in which order we should tackle all the elements that are needed to master the language. And this is exactly where textbooks come in. Textbooks are basically selling on the point of providing a structure. And I wouldn't argue against that. A textbook is a good starting place to understand the basic concepts of how the language works in a somewhat logical order. And also, following a textbook offers a nice feeling of making progress. We physically turn the pages, we tick off new grammar points, and work ourselves from chapter to chapter. And finishing grammar exercises actually feels like tangible proof of we're heading somewhere, which actually feels good, I must admit. The fundamental problem here is that this is more of an illusion of progress rather than actual progress. At least if your goal is to become able to comprehend and speak the language at some point. Allow me to explain. What textbooks are providing is cognitive knowledge of our target language, not ability. And there is a huge difference between the two of them. Let's say you were being asked to learn playing the drums. Imagine you read a book about how to play the drums. There would be descriptions of techniques, an explanation of different types of beats, how to hold the drumsticks properly, and so on. If after reading that book you were asked to sit down and play, would you be able to do it? No, of course not. All that you've learned so far is the theory of playing drums. And all that cognitive knowledge, even if you can recite it word for word, would not enable you to magically do the actual thing. And this is where ability comes in. Ability is the practical application of your theoretical knowledge. So it's about being able to actually do the things that you know. The ability to actually play a rhythm or maintain steady timing while drumming involves muscle coordination, hand-eye coordination, and probably some other stuff that I'm not aware of because I'm not playing the drums. And the only way to build that ability is to practically engage with the thing for hours upon hours. So you get good at playing the drums? Well, by playing the drums. You get good at swimming? By practicing swimming, not reading books or watching videos about swimming techniques. And surprise, surprise, you get good at understanding and speaking Japanese? Well, by practicing understanding and speaking Japanese, not by learning the theory of how the language works. Now you may say, Matt, wait. That doesn't work, right? I mean, how should I engage with the language if I don't really understand the grammar and words? Well, my answer would be, you already did it once, so you can do it twice. Unless you had a somewhat unusual childhood, chances are that you learned the first language by, well, listening to tons of input by your parents and other people around you. No one was teaching you all the details, rules, and the theory of conjugating verbs, yet you were able to express at some point whether you had already eaten an apple or would still like to eat an apple. So let me grab my coffee and pause here for a second because things are becoming a bit dicey from here on. There are very different theories and views out there on how adults acquire or learn foreign languages. And I'm not trying to make a point here on what theory I think is the best or wrong or correct one. I'm just going to share my view on the topic based on my own experience of having learned 3 foreign languages myself. Okay, end of disclaimer. Yeah, that's not gonna end well. So it's scientifically proven that the physiology and function of our adult brain is quite different from when we were kids. That's no surprise. But there is evidence out there that the subconscious, powerful systems that enable us to acquire our first language remain available to a large degree even when we're adults. So in this sense, we can think of our brains as a supercomputer that tries us to help understand, but needs a ton of data points in the form of comprehensible input in the target language to slowly recognize and combine patterns to make sense of it all. So, short story time to illustrate that effect. At some point in my language learning journey, I reckoned that I was still very bad at understanding spoken Japanese. So I started to listen to audio files from Japanese textbooks, like Anki for example, which were fine. I could understand them, but they were not very interesting content-wise, to say the least. And then I started to listen to a podcast aimed at beginner-level Japanese learners called Nihongo Konteppei for Beginners, link in the description below, which was a very good entry, but still, I was getting bored of that one quite quickly as well. But then I found that Teppei-san also had a podcast that was more aimed at intermediate learners of Japanese, which at the time felt way above my level, I'll be honest here. It felt super fast and I barely understood anything of what was being said, maybe 20%. But since I did not really know any better, I just kept listening every day over weeks and weeks and trying my best to at least identify some words that I already knew. And at some point, I actually realized that I understood more in the range of 50%, at least enough to understand the general topic and direction of an episode. So I kept going and going, actually starting to prioritize my listening to the podcast over my textbooks until I reached an almost 100% understanding of that podcast. And then the jump to content that was aimed at native speakers was just the same. It was very difficult at first, and soon thereafter, almost fully comprehensible, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me until this day, to be honest. And irrespective of the different theories of language acquisition, I am 100% convinced that no textbook or textbook audio files could have done that for me. Unfortunately, I realized that quite late, and I've been stuck for so long in the misconception that I needed to learn more and more the theory of how Japanese works in order to understand the language at some point. Yeah, I will switch off the subtitles once I understand the language. I will listen to that podcast for natives once, well, I am at that level. So in some sense, I was trapped in my loop of textbook-based learning, and I fell victim to that illusion of making progress by gaining more and more theoretical knowledge of Japanese at the cost of making actual progress in the form of my ability in Japanese by exposure to the language. So how to assemble the puzzle pieces here to actually up our Japanese acquisition game. First things first, I don't think that there is anything wrong with using textbooks. I'm sure that all the knowledge about grammar that I gained from textbooks played a huge role in supercharging my comprehension of Japanese. It's just a question of how to integrate it into the overall language learning approach in an effective way. And to be honest, I was not very good at that. I think that if you're an absolute beginner of Japanese and you start from zero, front-loading your understanding of how the language works by using a textbook is absolutely reasonable. This is where our unfair advantage as adults is coming in. Actually, our brains have become quite effective at understanding conceptual knowledge and applying it to practical experience in the real world in order to derive meaning. So in this sense, I think that textbooks can actually help accelerate the language acquisition process, if not overused at the expense of exposing oneself to target language input. But if you're already at an intermediate or even advanced level of Japanese, chances are that there is not that much benefit to be had for you in using a textbook really. What I found effective for me is to not work myself through a textbook from beginning to end, but instead just every now and then I would look up grammar points as I come across them when immersing in Japanese content or during my conversation classes. And the absolute priority of my language learning nowadays goes into immersion. But I realized that especially beginners of learning Japanese seem to struggle with how to get started in their immersion approach. So I've made a full guide on how to immerse yourself effectively into Japanese for beginners, which you can check out probably here. And I hope that helps and saves you some time. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.